Whoa, hold on a minute, Samantha. What is that title, I hear you asking? Halo is just a fun, shooty pew game where you space hop through linear but masterfully crafted missions where you kill big bad aliens. There's no messages or themes in it at all. And that's incorrect. Thanks for watching. Thank you to Serena J. Fleming and Jamie Harris for pledging $1 a month. Okay, but seriously, before we do anything, I'm gonna have to ask you to give me the benefit of the doubt a bit here. Halo is not as focused on its themes or ideals as much as a Ghost in the Shell or a System Shock is, but nevertheless it, like most fiction, has something to say on some level, and I think what it does have to say can be pretty interesting. Specifically, I want to focus on Halo 2, not just because I view it as the game in which the overarching themes of the plot are the most prevalent, but also because there's like a fucking lot of Halo games, and I don't want to make a Joseph Anderson-sized video analyzing the central themes of the entire franchise. So when I talk about the central theme or message of the Halo franchise, what do I mean? Well, I think when it comes down to it, Halo is about the dangers of religious extremism and how faith and fundamentalism can blind us to obvious truths. To tell you why I came out of the original Halo trilogy with this interpretation of the narrative, I will have to give some background context.
The elites are blind, Arbiter, but I will make them see.
The Covenant is a coalition of dozens of alien races who are all unified by their faith in the Great Journey. The idea that activating the Halo rings is the key to accessing the path to a utopian afterlife. In truth, it's actually a WMD made to wipe out all life in the galaxy in order to starve out the parasitic zombie hive mind of the Flood. They're led by a race known as the San Shayum, also known as the Prophets, who guide their path towards ascension in the Great Journey. Immediately, the disingenuous nature of the Covenant becomes clear. The San Shayum originated from a planet called Janjar Quam, a world littered with an immense amount of Forerunner artifacts. The natal state of the Covenant was born out of a political party called the Reformists, who wanted to use Forerunner technology to completely reform San Shayum society. After a civil war, the Reformist Party left Janjar Quam sometime in the early BCs. Over time, the Reformists began to worship Forerunner technology as relics left behind by gods who had left their realm eons ago, and they, the San Shayum, were the Forerunners' chosen prophets as evidenced by the sheer amount of Forerunner artifacts on Janjar Quam. The San Shayum happening to form a religion which also retroactively justifies why they should be in ultimate power is kind of convenient to say the least. Soon, however, the early Covenant came into brutal conflict with the Sangheli, or elites, of the planet Sanghelios. This conflict was known as the War of Beginnings because the war ended with the Sangheli being converted to the San Shayum's faith, which led to the official formation of what we now know as the Covenant. The Covenant would carry on. The San Shayum would continue to recruit new races into the Covenant, and placed each of them in a strict racial hierarchy with themselves at the top. Why were the San Shayum at the top? Easy. They were the chosen prophets of the Forerunners, and thus most fit to guide all the other races towards salvation by way of igniting the Halo rings and ascending into godhood. This allowed them to label even mild doubt toward their ability to rule as heresy of the highest order, and the faithful would have little room to argue. That was until the discovery of humanity, whose very existence posed a threat to the Covenant's structure of power. Why? Well, because the human race is what are known as Reclaimers, the species chosen by the Forerunners before firing the Halo rings to take up the mantle of responsibility, a sort of manifest destiny to maintain galactic peace and order. We, humanity, were the Forerunners chosen, and not the San Shayum, which means that the existence of humanity put reasonable doubt upon the San Shayum's right to rule within the internal logic of the Covenant's faith. And the San Shayum knew this, so the San Shayum deemed humanity a heretical species, and declared their destruction to be the will of the gods. With this understanding of what the Covenant is, you see exactly how the Covenant maintains its power structure, declaring their rule to be the will of the gods, making their leadership very hard to justify questioning for the faithful. With the elimination of humanity, nothing would stop them from maintaining their power for the rest of the foreseeable future. That is, Until... Yikes.
When you first saw Halo, were you blinded by its majesty?
With the destruction of the Halo Ring, the commander of the Covenant forces sent to take it was punished by being given the title of Arbiter. Arbiters are effectively slayers, if you're at all familiar with Warhammer Fantasy, except there's only ever one of them, so actually they're more like a bunch of Ungrim Iron Fists. Unknowingly, the assignment of this new Arbiter would number the days of the Covenant and lead to the downfall of the Prophets.
What would you have your Arbiter do?
Throughout Halo 2, we play as the Arbiter about as much as the Chief, with 6 of Halo 2's 14 levels featuring the Arbiter as the character we play. And it's from the perspective of the Arbiter that Halo 2 communicates its message on the dangers of religious extremism. From this point forward, we'll be referring to the Covenant races by the name they're referred to as in-game. So, Arbiter is an elite, Regret is a prophet, and Tartarus is a brute. Cool? Cool. So, Arbiter is sent to kill Sessa Rafumi, who's only ever referred to in the game as Heretic Leader. Sessa Rafumi was the leader of a gas mine on a planet orbiting Installation 04. You know, the one from earlier that went... The monitor of Installation 04, 343 Guilty Spark, escaped the destruction of Halo on Sessa Rafumi's gas rig and began speaking to him. However, he becomes increasingly puzzled at why members of the Covenant keep calling him an oracle and the ring a temple.
Glorious day. The prophets will be pleased that we have rescued an oracle from the humans' violation of the Holy Temple.
Why do you keep calling it a temple? My installation was a weapon, and one which we needed very, very badly.
But Oracle, I do not understand. We were told the rings are salvation, a gateway to paradise.
Told? By whom? Anyone who told you that is a fool, or quite mad.
Through their conversations, 343 Guilty Spark illuminates just how much the Prophets have been lying to the elites, and to all the Covenant races, even themselves. This, understandably, makes Sessa Rafumi lose faith in the Covenant and launches a separatist campaign from within his mining facility. I want to hyper-focus for a minute on what Sessa Rafumi says about how the elite, and presumably all other Covenant races, integrate into the Covenant.
For generations, our holy arrangement put the prophets in charge of religion and technology. The elites led our military forces to convert new species and find relics such as your Halo.
And these relics you sought, the San Shayum, your prophets, told you that they would lead you on this great journey?
Yes, transcendence, eternal life. Their promises were endless. We gave up our old ways to follow the Prophet's lead on the great journey. Gave up all of our history, all of our traditions.
It's plain to see, with this, that the Covenant conquers races much like how other colonialist powers did in our own history. Remove the culture, separate a people from their history, forcefully integrate them into a social system that puts you in power over them, and watch as they subjugate themselves. The title of Arbiter is just another way the Prophets enforce their will upon the races of the Covenant, and dissuade those from challenging the Covenant hierarchy. The first Arbiters were warrior kings, the supreme leaders of the elites, but after an Arbiter named Fal Chavami used his position as Arbiter to try to challenge the authority of the Prophets, he was labeled a heretic and made an example of. And after that, the title of Arbiter was a mark of shame. Those who became Arbiters were high-ranking and influential elites who committed great heresy, which is often on the grounds of flimsy at best justifications. As Guilty Spark himself says,
I'm starting to fear that you're not very smart.
Mind your tongue, Oracle.
Oh, I mean no offense. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about your species. How long have these prophets been anointing arbiters?
Since the fall of Falchavami, the first disgraced Arbiter, roughly 400 years ago.
Incredible! And in all this time, it never occurred to you how convenient it was that your prophets were able to find a powerful, capable leader among your people, who happened to suddenly commit a terrible blasphemy every time the power structure of your covenant was threatened.
After learning all this, Sesarifumi rightfully declares that the Covenant is rotten and corrupt to its core, and that the elites must turn on the Covenant. He begins broadcasting his message across High Charity, and the Arbiter is sent to silence him. The Arbiter then fights his way through the mining installation, and ends up cornering Sesarifumi, where Sessa then tries to talk to the Arbiter, tell him what he figured out. And it seems like it's going well until...
04.
Ask the Oracle about Halo. How they would sacrifice us all for nothing.
More questions? Splendid. I would be happy to assist you.
Really, Sessa? You were almost getting through to him, and then you just decided to blast a volley of plasma into his mouth. Arbiter then puts Sesarifumi down, and his short-lived rebellion dies with him. But the first tiny seeds of doubt have been placed in the Arbiter's mind. After this, oh fuck! While we weren't looking, Master Chief killed one of the Hierarchs, the Prophet of Regret. Oh fuck! Oh fuck! Oh fuck! Oh fuck! If Thelvadami failing to protect a sacred ring wasn't bad enough, the Elite Honor Guard failing to protect the life of a Hierarch was the last nail in the coffin for the Elites. The Elites are stripped of their status as second highest on the racial hierarchy of the Covenant and placed below the Brutes, who take up the mantle of the Prophet's protectors. This sucks, Arbiter thinks, and he kinda questions whether or not this is a good idea. But he's still faithful to the Great Journey, and if this is what the Prophets feel is best, who is he to question them? Now is not the time for questions, because a new Halo's been discovered. Delta Halo. And now, Arbiter is being assigned to retrieving the Icon, the object you use to actually activate the ring, making sure the humans don't get their hands on it. Arbiter goes down, fights his way through an army of Flood and Forerunner defense systems, and eventually encounters Sergeant Johnson and Commander Miranda Keys, who went to get the Icon as well. Arbiter handily defeats both of them with little effort, and as he's about to grab the Icon...
Excellent work, Arbiter. The Hierarchs will be pleased.
The Icon is my responsibility.
Was your responsibility. Now it is mine. A bloody fate awaits you and the rest of your incompetent race. And I, Tartarus, chieftain of the Brutes, will send you to it.
And the Prophets learn of this, that they will take your head.
When they learn. Fool. They ordered me to do it.
So, if Arbiter's day couldn't get any worse, Tartarus basically just told him that the Prophets have ordered his entire race to be genocided. And after he's told that, he gets launched into a pit to his own death. But instead of dying, he's dragged into the lair of a mighty beast known only as the Gravemind. He's brought, with Chief as well, face to face with the Gestalt consciousness of the entire Flood. The Gravemind reveals to the Arbiter the full extent of the Prophet's lies, but the Arbiter is initially unwilling to listen. So instead, the Gravemind shows him, and teleports him to a forest on Delta Halo, where he sees firsthand the genocide and extermination of his people at the hands of the Brutes. And it's made clear, as he fights his way through the forces of the Brutes, that the Prophets viewed him as disposable, that the moment the Prophets couldn't get any more use out of you, you'd be removed with the mercilessness and lack of empathy as one would when stepping on an ant. Witnessing the massacring of his own people by the state which he used to serve hand on foot for his entire life is enough for him to turn fully against the Covenant and its faith, and he resolves to stop the firing of Delta Halo.
by the rings.
Arbiter, the counselors, are they murdered by the brutes? Vile, disloyal beasts. The prophets were fools to trust them. What is that place? Where the counselors were meant to watch the consecration of the Icon. The start of the great journey.
There is still time to stop the key from turning.
I must get inside. Then mount up, Arbiter. I know a way to break those doors.
After he makes this decision, he fights through more brutes until eventually reaching the firing room and stopping Tartarus from firing the ring by fucking shanking him. The story then ends with Arbiter, Johnson, and Miranda Keyes making a rather chilling discovery, which leads directly into the events of Halo 3.
Fail-safe protocol. In the event of unexpected shutdown, the entire system will move to standby status. All remaining platforms are now ready for remote activation.
Remote activation? From here?
Don't be ridiculous.
Listen, Tinkerbell, don't make me...
Then where? Where would someone go to activate the other rings?
Why the Ark? Of course.
And where, Oracle, is that?
I'm starting to fear that you're not very smart.
So, in order to understand the deeper messages or themes behind this story, you need to also understand Halo's relationship to religion. Spoiler alert, it's complicated! Religious references dot the Halo universe, and unlike Evangelion, they aren't there just because the creator thought giant monsters exploding into giant crosses was cool. They typically have a bit of a deeper meaning you can extrapolate. Usually it just has textual similarities, but many times there's a genuine amount of thematic weight behind the reference. For instance, there's a lot of ways in which certain aspects of the story mirror Bible stories. The Flood and Noah's Ark being the largest example, but there's one in particular I want to mention for this specific discussion. Anybody ever read the Book of Daniel? The Book of Daniel is a book of the Old Testament, the third section of the Hebrew canon. There's a specific portion of the book I want to talk about because I think it's really interesting. Daniel 11, verses 21 through 45. At first, I was going to read out that entire section of the Book of Daniel, but that would take way too long. And this video is already long enough. In essence, Daniel 11, verses 21 through 45, tells the story of a king, known only as the North King, who rejects the faith after a shameful defeat, rallies his armies and courts the loyalty of those who are similarly unfaithful, and then returns to exact his vengeance on the faithful to the Holy Covenant. Now, the North King is vilified. He's the antagonist of this story, but the Arbiter is the North King. Foregoing some minor details, the overall story is the same. Shameful defeat, loss of faith, and then exacting vengeance on the faithful. This is important because the theme of the Book of Daniel is that God has sovereignty over all kings, and that even if you command the mightiest armies or have dominion over the largest empire, you're still beholden to the will and whims of God. So telling this story, but from the perspective of the North King, shows what kind of message Halo 2 is going for. It is a story that is deeply critical of religious hierarchy and how people abuse religion to their own ends. The hierarchs use religion to control the masses, and people like Tartarus use the racial hierarchy of the Covenant to enable his racist goals of genociding the elites. This is a story in which the villains are unilaterally people who abuse faith to manipulate and use people. If the theme of the Book of Daniel is that God has absolute, unquestioning sovereignty over the greatest of kings, Halo 2 asks whether or not that's a good thing, and explores a pretty rational scenario by taking a story from the Book of Daniel and flipping it on its head, showing in what ways divine inspiration can be used as a weapon of manipulation and exploitation. It's important to note that I'm not saying Halo 2 is condemning religion or faith. Halo 2's theme is not religion bad, and never is purely the act of being faithful itself condemned. I repeat, for the Rick and Morty fans and the Emperor of Mankind stands sitting in the back, this is not a game about how religion, in it of itself, is bad. The villains are not villainous because they are religious, but because they use religion to selfishly further their own goals. You can actually see this in who joins Arbiter during the Schism and who fights in favor of the current establishment. Arbiter, throughout the rebellion, finds allies in the elites, hunters, and grunts, all of which are races which genuinely believe in the Great Journey, where the primary Covenant enemies you fight during the Schism are brutes and jackals. Brutes and jackals both only joined the Covenant as an alliance of convenience. The people who rebelled were the ones particularly known for being genuine and uncompromising in their faith, and it's Arbiter's rebels, who will soon be known as the Swords of Sanghelios, who are portrayed in a positive light. I feel that this bears repeating because I do not want the message of Halo 2 to be construed into something I find morally reprehensible, that being the prejudice and discrimination of others based on religious affiliation. It's dumb. Stop doing it. In any case, I think Halo 2 is narratively one of the best games in the series, and this added layer of thematic depth really proves that. This biblical reference is far more than just, it called Mjolnir, it sound cool. No, this is focused and deliberate references which add, accentuate, and enhance the thematic through line of Halo 2. And frankly, the game's story is better for it.
And once they were branded Arbiter,
They promptly and quite cheerfully ran to meet their deaths.
In essence, Halo 2 is a game deeply skeptical of religious hierarchy and authoritarian power structures. It's a story of faith being twisted against the faithful, of authority being put into question, and of course, shooting aliens until they stop being alive aliens and become dead aliens. Halo 2 is one of my favorite Halo games, right up there with ODST and Combat Evolved as some of my favorite games of all time. It doesn't have as much nostalgia factor for me because I was only able to play the Anniversary Edition when that first came out on Xbox One, which was when I was like 14. Halo 2 still holds a special place in the Halo franchise and is generally regarded as narratively the strongest of the original Halo trilogy, and I hoped this video showed why.
Well, do I have an offer for you? Pre-order your copy of Halo 3 ODST at participating retailers now, and you'll get all the confidence you need. Me!
A special thank you to my lovely $1 patrons, Serena J. Fleming and Jamie Harris, along with our first $15 patron, Lucifer King. They have also been following the development of this very video over at my patron-exclusive Discord, which you can access for only $5 a month. And for just $1 a month, you can get your name read out loud at the end of every video, and the knowledge that you make these videos possible. Playing to the algorithm is hell, so making these big videos which divert from my usual path of 40k videos is a risk I'd only be willing to take if I had the support of patrons. So if you like this video and want to see more like it, go drop a buck or two over at patreon.com/salamander18. That's patreon.com/SALAMANDER18. Have a good day wherever you are, and keep social distancing, alright?
Dark